By morning, only two would return. The night before, three Hollywood legends, Natalie Wood, her husband Robert Wagner, and actor Christopher Walken, had set sail off California's Catalina Island aboard the yacht Splendour. The sea was calm, but tension simmered beneath the surface. Hours later, Natalie was gone. When her body was found floating beside the boat, the world refused to believe it was an accident. She was 43 in her prime, beloved for West Side Story and rebel without a cause. And yet, the questions began instantly. What really happened on that yacht? Robert Wagner said little. For years he avoided the cameras, haunted by a night that would define the rest of his life. Rumors grew, investigators reopened the case, and the silence became heavier than the truth itself. Now, at 95, Wagner has finally broken that silence. Not with a confession, but with reflection. A man at the end of his life, confronting the night that never let him go. They met when Natalie Wood was just a teenager, already a rising star with a face America couldn't forget. Robert Wagner was the handsome young actor every studio wanted, confident, polished, and impossibly charming. When the two appeared together in public for the first time, it felt like a story written by Hollywood itself, the golden couple of a golden age. But what the cameras didn't see was how deeply they were drawn to each other, how fast the connection burned, and how fragile it would become. Their romance began in the early 1950s, when Natalie was barely out of high school. Studio executives called them the perfect match. They married in 1957, a wedding that filled the pages of movie magazines, yet behind the photographs and the diamond smiles was a relationship ruled by intensity, the kind that draws people in but never lets them rest. Robert adored her, yet struggled to keep up with the fame that surrounded her. Natalie, for all her success, still sought safety in him. In time, that intensity became too much. By 1962, they had divorced, and both went their separate ways. To the world, it looked like another Hollywood ending, glamorous and final. But neither of them truly moved on. Even after years apart, Natalie kept a photograph of Robert in her home. Friends said she never spoke ill of him, only that he was part of her story. When they found their way back to each other in the early 1970s, it felt like destiny giving them a second chance. They remarried in 1972, both older, both changed. To friends, they seemed settled. A family at last, raising Natalie's daughters and escaping to their yacht on quiet weekends. Yet something still lingered beneath the surface. Robert was protective to the point of control, while Natalie's career was entering a difficult stage. Roles were fewer, the spotlight dimmer, and insecurities deeper. Those who knew them said their love was real but complicated. It wasn't built on fame anymore, but on the memories of who they once were. Natalie adored her husband, but feared his temper. Robert loved his wife, but couldn't shake the jealousy that haunted him. Their marriage carried both devotion and danger, a constant push and pull between love and resentment, between trust and doubt. When they boarded the Splendour that final weekend, friends thought it was meant to be a simple getaway, time to rest, to talk, to breathe. Christopher Walken, Natalie's co-star from Brainstorm, joined them for dinner. The mood, by most accounts, began light. But as the night went on, alcohol flowed, voices rose, and emotions blurred into something unpredictable. The people closest to them would later describe their relationship as a storm that never found calm waters. They loved hard, argued harder, and always came back to each other, until that final night when Natalie vanished into the dark sea. To the outside world, it looked like tragedy, but to those who knew them, it was heartbreak years in the making. Their story had always been dramatic, beautiful, and painful, the kind of love that burns too bright to last. For Robert Wagner, that love would become the defining shadow of his life. He once said that every success, every role, every moment afterward felt like it belonged to another man, one who had everything, and lost it in a single night. The weekend began quietly. On Friday, November 27, 1981, the Splendour left the mainland for Catalina Island. It was meant to be an escape. Dinner, wine, laughter, the kind of small freedom Hollywood couples rarely found. But by the time the yacht anchored near two harbors, something had shifted. Natalie seemed uneasy. The tension between her husband and Christopher Walken was visible, even to the small crew on board. Walken admired Natalie's dedication to her craft, encouraging her to keep acting, while Robert wanted her home, away from the industry that had consumed her since childhood. Two visions for the same woman, and a husband's pride caught in between. As the night unfolded, alcohol blurred judgment and softened boundaries. There were raised voices, sharp exchanges, and long silences. Some on board heard music, laughter that turned brittle, footsteps across the deck. Others remember only fragments, a bottle breaking, a door slamming, a voice carried by the wind. At some point, Natalie disappeared. No one saw her fall, and no one heard a splash. When Robert realized she was gone, the calm of the ocean turned into something merciless. Searchlights swept across the water. Calls echoed through the night. Hours later, a small inflatable dinghy was found drifting. Near it, the body of Natalie Wood. She was wearing a flannel nightgown, socks, and a red jacket, the same one seen in countless photographs taken that weekend. The Los Angeles County Coroner's report ruled her death an accidental drowning. It was said she tried to secure the dinghy, slipped, and fell overboard. The public wanted to believe it, because the alternative was too painful, that something darker had happened between two people who once seemed inseparable. But whispers began almost immediately. The captain, Dennis Davern, claimed arguments had erupted on board, that jealousy had poisoned the night. He said there was shouting, anger, and confusion before Natalie vanished. Others said the truth was simpler. She had been drinking, the sea was rough, and fate had been cruel. For Robert Wagner, the hours that followed would replay endlessly. He said he called her name until his voice gave out, that he hoped she had reached the shore, that somehow she was alive. But the image of her being pulled from the water, her hair tangled with seaweed and her wedding ring still on her finger, never left him. The world wanted answers, yet every version of that night contradicted the last. The official report said no foul play. The tabloids said murder. And in the silence between those extremes, truth was lost. What endures are the details. The glow of the yacht's lights on the waves, the empty wine glasses, the sound of laughter that faded too soon. It was supposed to be a weekend away, a breath before the holidays. Instead, it became one of Hollywood's greatest tragedies. For years afterward, the image of Natalie in that red jacket haunted the public imagination. To her fans, she was eternal youth and beauty. To Robert, she became a memory that refused to rest. Every interview, every photograph, every whisper brought him back to that night when he turned and found her gone. After that night, Robert Wagner's world closed in. He returned to the house he had shared with Natalie, surrounded by her things. The scent of her perfume still lingering in the air, the piano she loved still untouched. Everywhere he looked, she was there, but gone. For a while he tried to keep living as if nothing had changed. He took small film roles, appeared at charity events, smiled when he needed to. But those close to him said the man behind the smile had vanished. Hollywood moved on, as it always does. New stars rose. New headlines replaced the old ones. Yet Natalie's death never truly faded. Every few years the story resurfaced. Magazine covers, documentaries, whispered accusations. Some saw him as a grieving husband. Others saw something darker, a man escaping the truth. And Robert, determined not to relive that night, said almost nothing. In public, he became dignified and distant, protecting what little peace he could. In private, the silence consumed him. He once said that he would often wake before dawn, staring at the ceiling, hearing her laugh in his memory. People around him, friends, directors, even his daughters, learned not to mention her name unless he did first. Then, in 2011, the case reopened. The coroner's office reclassified Natalie's death from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors. Suddenly, Robert Wagner, then in his 80s, was named a person of interest. Cameras returned, headlines screamed, and for the first time in decades, the questions came back louder than ever. Reporters camped outside his home. The police requested new statements. Documentaries questioned old evidence, dissecting every minute of that night on the Splendour. But Robert didn't lash out. He didn't run interviews or hold press conferences. Instead, he chose silence once again. This time, not out of fear but exhaustion. His wife, actress Jill St. John, stood by him through the renewed storm. She shielded him from the noise, from the cruelty of the internet, and from the endless speculation that filled every talk show. To her, he was not a suspect. He was an old man haunted by grief, carrying a lifetime of regret. What few people understood was that silence can be both a prison and a form of survival. Robert had lost the woman who defined him, and no statement could bring her back or change public opinion. The more he stayed quiet, the more people filled the void with their own stories. When he finally spoke years later, it wasn't to defend himself. It was to honor her. He said he still loved her, that he always would, and that the years without her had felt like a movie with no ending. There was no revelation, no shocking confession, just a weary acceptance that life had gone on. But the night never left him. By the time Robert reached his 90s, his voice had softened, his movements slower. He stopped giving interviews, stopped attending events, and retreated into the quiet of Aspen, where he could look out at the snow and remember her the way she was, laughing, alive, and full of light. To the public, his silence looked like secrecy, but to those who knew him, it was something deeper, a man trying to make peace with the one story he could never rewrite. When Robert Wagner finally spoke about that night, it wasn't with a reporter or a detective. It was in the quiet pages of his memoir, Pieces of My Heart. The words were simple, stripped of defense or spectacle. He didn't name culprits or conspiracies. Instead, he described a feeling, the helplessness of realizing the woman he loved was gone, and the torment of knowing he would never truly understand how it happened. "I looked for her," he wrote, "and she was gone." That sentence carried decades of silence within it. No explanation, no speculation, only loss. It was as though time had taken everything from him except the memory of that single moment, turning, searching, calling her name into the dark. He admitted that he and Natalie had argued that night. They both had been drinking, emotions raw, words cutting deeper than either intended. But he never described violence. He said that jealousy, pride, and old wounds had found them again, even on a boat meant to bring them peace. When he realized she was missing, he said the fear hit him before reason did. He shouted for her, searched the deck, and prayed she'd be climbing into the dinghy to calm herself. But she wasn't. For years, Wagner lived with the guilt that maybe he hadn't acted fast enough, that maybe if he called the Coast Guard sooner, she would have survived. It wasn't an admission of wrongdoing, it was the ache of hindsight, the slow punishment of what if. In later interviews, his words became even softer. "Natalie was everything to me," he said. "She was my life." He never claimed to have answers. Instead, he spoke like a man aware that truth can fade with time, that memories bend under the weight of grief. When asked why he waited so long to speak, he said simply, "There are things you can't talk about until your heart is ready." That readiness didn't come easily. It took decades of surviving the rumors, the documentaries, and the quiet judgments that followed him everywhere. But as he aged, the fear of being misunderstood began to matter less than the need to be honest, if only with himself. His daughters, including Natasha Gregson Wagner, began speaking about their mother more openly too. Natasha, Natalie's eldest, once said that she loved her father and believed he had suffered more than the world would ever know. Their bond, once strained by tragedy, became gentler over time, the kind of forgiveness that isn't about proof, but about love refusing to die. By the time Robert turned 95, the edges of the story had softened. He no longer defended, denied, or explained. He reflected. He spoke about Natalie as though she were still somewhere near, her laughter still echoing through the halls of memory. In his later years, Wagner began appearing in fewer interviews, content to live quietly in Aspen with Jill St. John. Friends say he often revisits old photographs. Natalie on set, Natalie smiling by the sea, and talks to her picture before bed. Whether that's a ritual of love or penance, no one knows. To the public, his words may never be enough, but to Robert, they are all he has left. The truth of a man who watched the love of his life disappear into darkness and has spent the rest of his years trying to find peace with the memory. More than 40 years have passed, and still, the waves off Catalina Island seem to carry her name. Every few years, a new documentary, a new interview, or a new theory tries to explain what really happened that night, but the truth remains tangled somewhere between memory and myth. Investigators have revisited the case again and again, re-examining witness statements, testing evidence, comparing timelines. In 2018, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department announced there were new witnesses and described Robert Wagner as a person of interest. Yet even then, no charges were filed, no conclusions reached. There were just fragments, the sound of raised voices, the echo of a broken heart, and the silence of a sea that keeps its secrets. For fans of Natalie Wood, that silence feels cruel. She had given the world so much, grace, beauty, and vulnerability, that felt real in every role she played. To see her story reduced to suspicion has always felt unfair. Her name should have been remembered for her talent, not for a question that will never fully be answered. Still, the mystery refuses to fade. Some point to jealousy, others believe it was a tragic accident. But in truth, the only two people who could ever know what really happened are Natalie and Robert, and only one still lives to remember it. That weight has defined his later years. Wagner no longer speaks about the investigation. When asked, he turns the conversation to her legacy, insisting that Natalie should be remembered for her light, not her death. He has donated to charities in her name, attended tributes, and written that he still feels her presence when he hears certain music or passes the ocean. And yet the questions continue to circle, because some stories resist peace. Perhaps it's because Natalie's death symbolizes something larger, the illusion of perfection in Hollywood, the price of fame, and the tragedy that sometimes hides behind beautiful photographs. To those who knew her, the theories mean little. Her sister Lana still believes something was hidden that night. Her daughter Natasha, however, has chosen grace. She has said that she believes in forgiveness more than answers, that she loves both her parents, and that living in bitterness would mean losing her mother all over again. That quiet forgiveness has done more to close the story than any police report ever could. It reframes the tragedy not as a crime but as a wound the family has carried for generations. A reminder that love and loss often share the same space. When Robert Wagner looks back now, he sees not the yacht or the headlines, but the life they built before everything fell apart. The laughter on film sets, the holidays with family, the years when love felt unshakable. He has said little about whether he believes the world has treated him fairly. Perhaps fairness was never the point. In the end, the mystery of Natalie Wood's death remains what it always was, a mirror reflecting grief, guilt, and the impossibility of closure. The sea took her body, but the questions never sank. And for Robert Wagner, each new day is a reminder that some truths cannot be spoken, only carried. Robert Wagner lives quietly now, far from the lights that once defined him, The man who once moved through Hollywood with effortless charm has become reflective, slower, but still dignified. At 95, he carries the weight of a love story that began with promise, burned with passion, and ended in tragedy. To the world, the mystery endures. To him, it has become a kind of prayer, one he repeats in silence. He no longer asks for answers. He asks for peace. The years have softened his edges, but not his memories. He still speaks of Natalie as though she might walk through the door, still uses we instead of I. For Natalie's fans, her beauty and talent remain frozen in time, untouched by rumor or speculation. For Robert, her loss became the dividing line between the man he was and the man who learned to live with ghosts. Some stories end with truth. Others end with love that refuses to die, even after everything else fades. Theirs was both, a story written in light and shadow, in fame and heartbreak, in devotion that outlasted understanding. For more emotional stories, check out this video.